Okay, so the last part in our series for the backend is on authentication. So we want to do a way for our users to authenticate themselves. And for this example, we want to have a way to know if a user is creating a to-do, and also have a way to stop them from creating or listing a to-do if they are not authorized. So let's set up the things that we need. Let's go back to our setup here. The first thing that we need to do is to create the ability to create a user. So let's create user and have an index.js. Then we'll copy this one. Well, of course, not everything. Well, up to create. Then just remove these. Okay, of course, we'll just check it out here. And then we'll also have a create.js. Then copy this one and put it here. Now, given that, go back to create. Let's just remove this comment because we don't need it anymore. And from here on out, we also don't need it here. Now, what we want to set up for the user is, if we want to create a user, of course, we will change different things in this one. So let's just close other so that we clean up our setup for creating a user. And create one user. Now we'll need to change all of these things. And one thing that we want to first do is create our own model for the database. So for that to happen, we go to the models, we create user.js, and then just copy the to-do and put it here. Then we don't need UUID because what we would need is the username to be the one that is unique and should be required. Well, of course, this is already required if this is unique and index and all. Then password, like this one. For now, we don't want to add additional first name, last name, and so on and so forth. But later on, we'll add it up, or in your exercise, we'll add it up. And let's just change the name from to-do schema to user schema, and then add it up here in the DB index so that we can use it. Models, user, mongoose. After that, we go back to the routes user, and instead of using to do here, we're going to use new to do, and we're expecting a username and a password from the body. So save it here. Now we'll need to change this so that it will it will create a documentation on what to send and what to receive. So we'll go to the definitions folder and create, let's say, a data about the user. So let's have a const username data, which has, I'm just going to copy this because I am too lazy. Unique username, and the value is, let's say, password 12345. This is not a good password though, so let's just use this as a password and remove the dash so that I can copy it later. So this is a unique username. My mind is racing towards using password data, and I'm already thinking about the password instead of the username. So let's just try my username, which is this one, and this is the password. This is password string, and then we just create a const post request, user request. This is for the creation of the data itself. We copy this user object for creation. We have a username as and the password, password, username data, password data, post user request. We add it up here, and then what we need to do is get one user response. Yeah. Oh, we'll use we'll do this first. User pool data. Then we just add a user data for response without the password. So let's try to copy something that is already here. Yeah, and then username. Now without the password, but we just date created and date updated. So let's have the username data. So from here on out, we would get one user response. We'll just do this. Returns a user, and instead of to-do list data, it's using userful data. The reason why I'm doing this is that I can just reuse the same definition parts in my code without rewriting everything. So get one user response and post user request, and I'll just do this, put it here, and then I'll just have to add user. Let's see if it's correct. Nope, it's using to do, so we'll just update this. and we just add user app here. Now it is working, as you can see in our restart of our server. So let's try it out. Let's see if it's going to work. So remove this, and now we are seeing user here, which says create one user. We try it out. We execute, and of course, we got the username and date updated and date created. Now, just to show you the power of the response and how it filters out our setup, let's just console log save. No, not save. Data to JSON. Let's just try it out. Of course, if I do this again, if I execute it again, it will return an error because there's a duplicate key named tjmonsi. So let's just add tjmonsi1. You see that there's only username, date created, and date updated. But if we print out data to JSON, we have ID, username, password, which is a little bit problematic if we print out the password, date created, and date updated. So the cool thing, which I wasn't able to show earlier, is that using the response, we are able to filter out what we just want to show on our response. That's one thing. Now, some of you who are a little bit more on the security side would think that is not a good way of saving a password, because you're saving it as plain text. If someone else can see the password, or if someone else can see your database, or if I refresh this, you'll see there's users already. And if I look into it, I can see the password, and I can just copy and paste it, and for later use, or maybe I can sort of use this password to access a different user, and it's a really bad thing. So for us to secure the passwords, we will need to install a package known as bcrypt. So we'll save it here. Okay, it's done. It took quite a while to install it on my end, so I'm going to shorten it for you guys. So now that we have installed bcrypt, it's a encryption library. So I'm not going to discuss more of it. You can just go and find how it works. But it allows me to encrypt passwords so that you'll see a more garbled text on the password. And even if you copy paste that password, copy the password from the database and then use it as your input in, let's say, a username password login part, it will not work. So let's do this. I'm just going to add salt rounds for a little bit more randomness. And what we'll do is we will create a hash from bcrypt hash using the password and the salt rounds. So as you can see here, it's a promise to be either resolved with the encrypted data salt or rejected with an error. So yep, okay, we're done. Oh, not this one. Yeah, and we just do this. So if we do this, tjmonsi2, execute again. Oh, I forgot to start the server. Execute again, it's a success. If we check the database, control enter, we'll see that the password is very much different from the password that we have put. Now, how do we compare it? So let's create a login. Login.js. Now, the idea here, this is where we deviate from our guidelines, where we, in essence, we deviate from our guidelines that says this should be like the CRUD only. So this is part of the action, and it's not really part of the user model. We're just going to use the action name that we want to put. So logins, logs in a user. That is so weird English out there. Logs in a user. It's the same as post user request. And let's just use first the success response. Okay. Now let's just remove everything here. Delete all documents before testing, and I'm just going to use jmonc here with that password. Now it has created, so if we enter this, now we have the key and everything else here. After that, we're now creating the login, which is actually supposed to be logging in, and we are taking in the username and password. So we will just delete these things for us. On login, what we want to do is, instead of creating the hash, so this is not a good way of, like, of course, comparing passwords, like getting the password and so forth. So what we will need to do is we get the user first using the username. User.find1 username, then exec. Now for the password, to get the same or to compare passwords, we will not hash our password and then check if the password in the user is the same as the password here, because every time you use hash, it creates a different string or password for you, depending, of course, on the salt rounds and the state of the machine that you are working on. So what we will need to do is, bcrypt has a way to compare a hash string with a plain text string. So we do that. Bcrypt compare with the password, which is the plain text string, with the user password, which is the hashed version. Now I'm enclose it with a parenthesis so that I'm going to check if it's not correct, or if it's not the same. We should return a response that is a code 401, which means unauthorized. And let's just send a success false code, let's say unauthorized, and message is wrong password. Then we'll just delete this. We don't need this. Every time I'm using true or false, tap would just add true. I don't know why. So going to add login as part of the user root or library. And after that, we will check. So there's the login. If we try it out, it should, oh, data is not defined. Because there's no data, sorry. Execute, and then it's success true. If I change the password, so let's say password 123, it says unauthorized because I'm using a wrong password. If I use the hash password here, so copy value and use it here, it will not work as well. That at least secures our setup, but it doesn't mean that we are now able to correctly authorize ourselves. It just means that we are able to compare our password with the password saved in our database. So let's add first this part where we commit everything first. Git chore add decrypt, and then feature add user model in database. The definitions will also add user request and response validation and documentation. Lastly is feature add user create and login. Now, given that, we will have to add a way to test it first. To test it, again, let's create a user. Create.test.js. I am just going to copy this whole thing here because I am too damn lazy to rewrite everything. And then user, for creating a user, then let's have it usernames, then we just have username, usernames, username, user. It should return success, new user object, and has status code 200 when using post. So this is user. Again, username is, let's say, user 01. The password is password 123456789, which is not a good password, by the way. We will have username here. Don't have other things. Username should be equal to user. There's no done. username database, no need for done. User here. There you go. There you go. There you go. And there you go. So then usernames, push username. And we don't need this one. Another happy path because we're just creating a username. If there is no username, so we just set password to password 12345678990. It should return a 401. Lastly, if we just have no password, this is a username, user02, and if we don't have payload, also would return an error. So there you have it. We have done this create test. So let's try it out first. We might get an error again because I might have missed something. So there, I have missed something here. Oh yeah, that is because we have used 401. Supposed to be it's just 400 because it's a malformed request. That is what we mean by thinking ahead. Now let's create first our login. And before we do this, it's proper to just use the same thing that we did for many using before. User username, password is password 12345678990. Just going to use usernames. This is username, and we don't need the delay anymore. Yeah, we don't need the delay anymore. From here on out, we will just need to use usernames 0, and it should there's no data as of the moment. So it's just going to do this. And if we use a different password, it should return 401 if, and we use a different password. So like password 123, use the same username. We'll have success here because we are using our own setup, and it's supposed to be 401. Now we'll remove this. Let's test it out. There's an error again. Login test. Oh, this is we're using. We should use login instead of user. Anyway, let's test it out. And here we go. It now works. So let's say test add create user and login test. Okay, after everything that we have just done, let's just see how we are having different errors. Like if I do this on a login, we have success code message, which should be our standard. If I do a user setup, it will have like an internal server error. You have status code error message, and so on and so forth, which is different. And then if we, let's say, do a post but without a text, you also have a different way of showing an error, which is status code error message. And what we want to have is a unified way of handling the message. In essence, if we look also on our code, we go for if we go for update, we have this way of creating an error and this way of sending an error, and we want to have a unified way of doing that. So before adding a way to authenticate ourselves, it's best to have a simplified way of handling errors. And what we'll need to do is install a new package named Sensible. So it's actually just npm I save Fastify Sensible. So after installing that, what we'll need to do is to add it on our application. So let's just add it. Sensible require Fastify Sensible, and then we register it. App register Sensible. But instead of just doing this, we add an additional item here called after, where we set error handler to use a function which I'm going to call it first as error handler. And where do we get error handler? We define it here. Error handler, or at least error handler, is a file that we will create later, or in a bit. So we'll create the error handler here. And what does the error handler is about? It's a way of handling all the errors that will happen in our code. So we have an error. We will just use, no, not this one. We will use this because I am again too lazy to rewrite everything. And also that's the reason why I'm having errors every now and then, because I am sometimes careless. So if we handle all those errors, what we'll need to do is just respond with, so return response code, let's say the status code given. So how do we get the status code? Let status code is equals to the error. So for everything in Fastify, the error would always have a status code, or either that or a 500 if there's no status code. And then send a success false code. Code is the error message, and let's just have the same thing as the message itself, error.message. So if we do this, let's see if it works for now. Oh, sensible. Okay, there you go. Error handler. There you go. Success false. Body should have required property text. Message is this one. So now we are able to have a way, and it's also a 500 internal server error. There's no status code. Let's see if it's error status code. So as you can see, it's undefined. That's why it returned a 500. What we can do, because this is a validation error actually, what we can do is, so for us to make sure that it returns the proper status code error, we will check the validation if it exists and if it has a length. So we can check it out by console log, but this is my so if it is like this, status code should be 400, and let's just create let error code is equals to error dot message, and let's just change this to request malform. That means something just went wrong on the malform. So if we refresh this again and execute it, we now get the proper response. For the user, if we try it out and we don't have a password, execute, it's a malformed request, and so on and so forth. Now we can also say if we have a password, there's the code 500, but what we want is to have it actually of a different number, but I can't think of it right now, so let's do that later. But now we can also go to update, and instead of doing this, we can just say return response dot return response dot bad request. Oh, well, or not really bad request, but not found, because we are saying that it's 404, and we'll just point it here. Instead of this one, we do this. So like if we try it out again on the update, this is where, oh, we also do this on get, like so. So instead of using this, we do this. If we do it on update, where's the update? There you go. So we know that this identifier doesn't exist, so we can see to do not found, to do not found, but that is not a good message. So what we will need to do is to update our handler and say let error message is equals to error dot message, and let's use this. If error message is equal to error code, we'll need to change the error message. Let's create a set of messages that if it's if it's a to do not found, so let's see, if not found, the message would be to do cannot be found using the given ID. So let's just put it up here, that it's going to be useful later on. And let's put error message is equals to errors the error code, or if it doesn't exist, well, later on we'll just have to like use it. So if we execute it again, now we have a different message. On this note, we'll need to update again the update.js, and for this one we can just use bad request so that it will return 400 and use to do malformed, or yeah, we can use request malformed. Let's just use request malformed and remove this. I copied payload, doesn't have text property, so that if we do this, necessary properties again for update. Let's just try it out. We don't have the text. We execute request malformed. This happens, and if we have the proper request but there's no unique identifier, to do not found. And that is how we make it easier for us to like type in a response error. So let's check it out if we are using a different response here, and if there's a different. Okay, so this one needs to use the get version. So delete, use delete, not found. There you have it. Let's add everything here. Oh. Data package JSON. Feature, use a unified error handling process. Then lastly is test, oh no, not test, sure, add Fastify sensible. There you go. The next video would have us add now the authentication and how to authenticate ourselves after logging in.